There we go. Now we've got my mic audio, and you're going to be able to hear the guys in a second. But welcome, everyone. Welcome. My name is Q Groves. I'm going to be your host today here on our special CannaBuzz Live Grow Talk edition. It's July 3rd, 2022. It's been a bit since we've done one of these streams, so we're really excited to do one of these, and we're going to be doing more of these things in the future. So please, we're going to be asking you, especially today and this month, to consider becoming a CannaBuzz Premium member. I'm going to flip over to a screen right now to show you how you can do that. So 1 second. All right, you should see my phone now up on the screen. What I'm going to do is you can use the discount code 420 summer to get your month of or 3 months of CannaBuzz Premium for $4.20 a month. So all you need to do is open the slide out menu. What I'm going to do is tap up in the top left hand corner to pop out the slide out menu and find subscription options down towards the bottom. I'll tap that, and that's going to open up our subscription options page. It's going to tell you about becoming a supporting member. And then you see CannaBuzz Premium right there, and you can get it for $4.20 a month by selecting select, then checkout, and just type in the code 420, 420 summer, and then apply, and you'll get the discount for your first 3 months. You'll get it for $4.20 each. If you become a member, it really helps us keep CannaBuzz going. So I really appreciate it. If you do, consider it and consider upgrading to CannaBuzz Premium today. We'd really appreciate it. And it helps keep the lights on and keep us going and keep doing content like this and creating cool shirts like Dan's wearing and stuff like that. So your support is crucial. All right, enough of the CannaBuzz Premium commercial. Now we're going to go straight into our content. I'm joined today by my co-founder of CannaBuzz. He's over on my video screen right over there on your screen. He's JR Token. He's up there up top. Hello, JR. How's it going?
Going great. What's up, everybody? Happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me today. And then we also have a special guest from the CannaBuzz community. It's Pac Northwest, Dan. What's up?
Guys, hey, nice to meet you all. Yay, woo.
So Dan joined us. We've been hanging out with Dan. Dan's a CannaBuzz Premium member, and he supports us each month. And we've been hanging out with him in Discord lately, nerding out about plants and stuff. And we figured that it would be great to have Dan join us and share his grow knowledge. So a few days ago, when we put the call out that we're going to do this live stream, I made a post from the CannaBuzz account, and we asked you to submit your questions. So we got a number of different questions in that post, and we'll be going through those comments. I'm going to keep an eye out for the live chat. So as I say that, shout out to HG. Thanks for joining me, HG. Or joining us, I should say. HG, appreciate it. Wayneo, thanks for joining. I think they were the first to join. So what's up? And then they just said about the horizontal view. Once this video or live stream is done, it's going to be posted as a video that you can watch back. So if the view spec or whatever is a little wonky on your phone, just stay tuned later in the day when this video's up and you can watch it back, and should be fine from there. But all right, so let's get into my first question for everyone is going to be starting out with what are we growing right now? So, and I also shout out to the green green heart emojis that I just saw pop up in the chat. So anyways, Dan, you've got a picture of your garden right behind you. I don't know
Yeah,
how recent that is, but what are you growing these days?
that's probably a couple of months old. It's probably my last grow, but what I'm growing, it looks really similar to that. It's in that same tent. That's a 3x3 tent. I am growing 4 different phenotypes of 9-pound punch, which is from Jinx Proof Genetics. It's a cross of Purple Punch and 9-pound hammer. So I'm doing a pheno hunt. This is our second pass, so we've already grown out, wound up being 3. We've got our pick from the past one. We've got 4 in we're week 7 right now. So about 2 more weeks we'll be harvesting these 4.
Awesome. JR, you got yourself on mute there. There you go. JR, what are you up to these days in the grow?
Right now I'm in my flower room. I'm about 5 days away from chop, so everything's going to be coming down. Everything's looking really good. Pretty stoked about that run. But the next round is going to be exciting because I'm going to be testing a bunch of new stuff. Looking for some new gems. I've got Burnt Toast F2 from Raw Genetics. I've got Cherry Pie, which I got from Elite Clones. And I'm really excited about that. I haven't had cherry pie since, the mid 2000s. It was been a while. And then I've got two phenos of the peanut butter pie from Raw Genetics that I'm also going to be testing as well, along with some cherry paloma. So it should be a good run. Pretty excited about it.
Awesome. And I've got a about 6 plants in the backyard right now. It's we're right in the middle of summer, so and getting ready to start flowering in about a month now. Maybe a little less than that. We'll see. Last year it started flowering at some point in July, actually. So we'll see what the weather holds for us this year. But I'm growing forbidden fruit, which has cherry pie in it. So I'm super, super excited about forbidden fruits. If you've ever watched our past streams and heard me talk about my favorite strains, forbidden fruit's one of them.
Yeah.
And so I was able to score those seeds from CSI Humboldt. They did, I think they were S1s. So, and they're feminized. So I got a couple packs of those, and I've got, I think, about four of those growing. And then I've got a Raphael by Irie Genetics, and I've got a Margie's Magic, which is a seed that I got from Huckleberry Hill Farms, one of my favorite growers out here in California. But all right, and also shout out to everyone that's joining in the chat. We just saw Mo. Mo said that she loves cherry pie. Gina says she's having a great experience. Awesome. And HG called it a Streaminar. I'll take it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right. So, you guys both looked through the questions. Was there one that you felt like was a good one to start with, just off the top of your head, or should we just start going through them?
I think we should just go top to bottom. Let's go through them.
All right. Well, so if we go through the very first comment, if we go kind of from the very first to the last most recent comment, we'll start out with one that actually is very applicable to me. This was a question from Mo Trichome Farmer, or Lance. Lance asked, best defense outdoors for caterpillars. So this is applicable to me because I literally just pulled a caterpillar off one of my plants outside like 30 minutes ago. So I definitely have been there, done that with caterpillars. I'll start out with you guys, though. Do you guys have anything that you guys wanted to call out while we talk about defending against caterpillars?
I'll go first. The thing I would recommend for everyone is to first identify your caterpillar, identify your pest that's bothering you, then go on to arbico.com and then put in that pest, and they'll give you a list of every mode of action that you can use to combat that pest. And like for caterpillars, you can do spinosad. There's a lot of different things that you can do. You can do predator bugs. I know that they have a wide variety of beneficial insects available. So my main advice would be to identify your pest, get on Arbico. They even have a 1-800 number. You can call them. You can actually talk to a person about it. They're very knowledgeable, great website. That would be my first recommendation.
Yeah, it's arbico-organics.com. I know it by heart because I go to it a decent amount, being an outdoor grower. And I just was looking at their catalog the other day. I literally have one right there, looking at them. So I will echo that. Definitely go to Arbico Organics. They'll have a full page dedicated to caterpillars. Some of the stuff that I've used that that works. BT is what it's often called. Monterey BT is a form that you could find at most kind of like Ace Hardware or like garden stores or something like that. You could probably find Monterey BT, so that's a great option. But BT is a foliar spray that you can spray through flower, because that's what I find caterpillars. I'm not finding them on my vegetative plants. I'm finding them on my plants with flowers. Like the one that I just found this pretty big caterpillar on was one of my autoflowers. And of the caterpillars like to find the biggest, juiciest flowers that you have. They love to find the best looking bud on your entire plant. They're just absolutely ruthless. So Monterey BT is definitely a foliar spray that I would use, and you can spray it like once a week, maybe every other week. Keep doing that, clear through flower. And then you can also, on the bug side, there are some bugs. They're kind of like parasitic wasp type things. I forget what their name is, but they're going to be on Arbico Organics. And you can get those. You can actually buy like bi-weekly releases of them. So you'll sign up and they'll just send them in the mail to you every like 2 weeks. And that's what I did last year, where I would just get those bugs every 2 weeks, and you just do continuous releases all the way through flower. I've done that, and that worked pretty well. And then if you can, another thing that had that worked well last year was ladybug larvae. Ladybugs I find leave super quickly, but if you can get lucky and get them to stick around and get them reproducing, the ladybug larvae are really active and can be helpful for all sorts of bad bugs.
Yeah, I would add lacewing larvae to that as well. They're almost invisible small. They're teeny tiny. A little pack of them, you barely see anything in there, but a week later, there's no more aphids.
Yeah, lacewing larvae you can also buy on repeated releases. So you can subscribe on Arbico Organics to get them every couple weeks or whatever you need to do for your garden. And that's another great way, because a lot of these bugs, unfortunately, you can't just buy and like create a population that'll be self-sustaining. You need to kind of do continuous releases for a little bit. All right. Well, that's a great. Thanks to Moke Trichome Farmer for that first question. Let's see. Our next one was from Tara. Tara asked, "Can you cut out leaves on an autoflower?" And then they asked, "What's your favorite nutrient fertilizer?" So who wants to go first on this one?
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I can take this one. Yeah. So look, an autoflower is still it's cannabis sativa with a little bit of ruderalis in it. So the general rules are kind of the same. What I'm looking at is, can you cut out leaves? Sure, you can trim up an autoflower just fine. Just do it no differently than you would do it to any other flower in that phase of flowering. Where I would caution you is, and I know that this was also a question that somebody else had asked a little bit up there, which was topping autoflowers and how much do you actually want to cut it? That kind of comes down to, if you know you're going to be in veg for a while, like you've got a really big pot and it's going to really fill it out and you're going to try and get this thing bigger, topping them is just fine. If you've got a little 1 or 2 gallon pot and you trim that thing, it's probably not going to have enough time to recover before it starts flowering on you. So I would say trimming and topping, those kinds of actions are fine on an autoflower as long as you're sticking with bigger pots and you know that this thing is going to take 6 or 8 weeks of veg before it's going to flip itself into flower. And you've got time to get that thing bigger and train it a little bit. Little tiny autoflowers, I wouldn't do a whole lot of trimming on.
I would agree with that. If you do, with autoflowers, if you do too much topping, sometimes it'll stunt their growth. And like Dan said, they won't be able to recover in time when they flip into flower. And then you're just going to be at a loss of what the plant's potential could have been.
Yeah, you'll hurt your yield.
We had a couple of questions that came in through chat that I wanted, and also Tara asked about best nutrient fertilizer. So keep that purring in your guys' brain if you guys want to talk about nutrients and whatnot. But let's see. For HG had a question about BT. He basically asked, could you treat with BT in veg, and would that have a leftover impact during bloom? I don't think BT sticks around super long. It's going to decay like through the sun and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
BT is basically a bacterial byproduct, I think. Bacillus thuringiensis. It's either a
Yeah.
bacteria byproduct.
correct,
And
correct.
it's not a toxin for humans. It's bad for little tiny microscopic things and bugs.
And I would say that, like, especially if you're in an outdoor situation, like a backyard situation, any kind of morning mist, any kind of dew or rain is going to take that away. So you'll definitely want to reapply.
Yeah, it seems like a weekly basis. Out here where I'm at, caterpillars have completely fucked me up, basically. They're my number one pest that I have to deal with in flower. Besides like aphids that come through people's yards or whatever, at least love my yard. So doing like a weekly treatment of BT is probably not a bad idea. Or at least every couple weeks probably. Um, let's see. Wayneo asked, could you use a slug pellet kind of product to help prevent? I'm guessing that they meant help preventing caterpillars. Um, I don't. m- From my experience, I think caterpillars are going to be laid on your plant via eggs that are laid there from moths that are flying around. So they're not caterpillars that are like coming up from the ground,
They're not
really.
slugs.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But you can definitely use something like diatomaceous earth, like at the bottom of the plant, to help protect from slugs and maybe some other stuff that you want to keep off your plant.
And I want to also stress to people that if you're in an outdoor environment, do your best to combat what you can, but don't get too freaked out about it because nature always takes its cut.
Very true.
And the thing about these little worms or little caterpillars is the big problem is they burrow into the flower, and then they start shitting in there, and that shitting will start rotting, and that'll give you bud rot, and you'll start losing big giant chunk sections of your flowers if you don't. And so I mean, a lot of times mechanical removal, I mean, just constantly vigilant, they, like you said, they can really be an issue for some people in certain regions.
And that's how I just found, the caterpillar, like I said, like a half an hour ago. You gotta, the main thing that will, when talking about bugs and IPM or integrated pest management, is you have to look at your plants. Always be looking at your plants, and especially growing outside, if you can, and especially into flower, look at your plants every day if you can. I know that can be hard. I'm going to be going on vacation at some point in August, so I'll have to figure out how to keep my garden in check during that time. But when you're able to keep an eye on your plants, because what I was doing just a little bit ago is I was looking at the flowers and I noticed that one of the leaves was turning slightly brown. And so a green leaf turning brown like that, and what it was is a caterpillar had been eating the leaf. And so I looked up further and I saw the poop that JR was talking about, these little black round balls, basically. And you'll see a pile of them like on top of flowers and stuff like that. And usually I find what they like to do is, like, say my arm's the flower and this is the top of the flower, the top of the like branch or spear, I guess you could say. They'll like to come in right around here or down here and then work their way up. And they come in through the side of the flower and kind of burrow their way through the middle and then work their way up. So you might not even see the caterpillar by the time he's up here because he's eaten his way through the flower. So definitely you got to stay vigilant, or else you're going to miss it and wake up someday and all of a sudden you've got a whole branch that you just lost, basically. All right, I could go on and on about caterpillars because I hate them so bad. But anyways, next, so I'm not sure if you guys answered this earlier when Tara asked about favorite nutrient fertilizer, but do you guys want to talk about your favorite nutrient fertilizers real quick?
Go ahead, Dan.
Well, that's all going to depend on how you want to grow. I mean, there are entire, podcasts dedicated to which fertilizer is best for your particular grow. So answering that and narrowing it down to a sweeping generalization that you can do in a minute is probably not going to be, it's not appropriate to try and get that general with it. But there's generally different kinds of ways people are going to grow. If you're going to go organic, it's all about focusing on the soil and your microbes and all of that organic stuff that's going on in there. If you're going to add fertilizers or go chemical, like, chemical, like salt nutrients, there's some very, very good brands out there. I grow with the New Millennium line, and I also add a little bit of there's some other products I'll add in along the way, Playground Green Sensation and some other things, and I use for soil microbes and stuff like that. Um, you know, those are, and then Epsom salt, a magnesium sulfate in the water as well. That gets you a magnesium base because there's no magnesium as far as I can tell in the New Millennium line. So it has to come from somewhere. Um, but like that's what I do, but I'm doing indoor stuff. For outdoor, you may pick something very differently. I mean, organic to new mill, that's about opposite ends of the spectrum there, and then everything in the middle. I mean, you can combine the two.
For me, I use a kind of a synganic approach. Um, your root zones develop relationships with microbes. Microbes deliver the nutrients in exchange for sugar molecules, and that's their relationship. But in chelated nutrients, those nutrients already are broke down and available, so I kind of use the both of them, giving them kind of a buffet, if you will. So that way I make sure my microbes are happy, they're doing their job, establishing their relationships, and then at the same time, I'm hitting them with some chelated nutrients that are made available right from the bottle. Um, I use kind of a recipe. I keep a board. If you watch it in my videos, you see Botanicare is kind of like my base nutrient, and then I add stuff, organic biostimulants like Fox Farms Big Bloom, stuff like that, because you want to have a good organic input in order for your microbes to have good stuff to break down and make available. I also use a sugar product to feed my microbes. I use right now I'm using this product called Honeycomb. I really like it. I used to use molasses in the past, but I listened to Scott from Nectar for the Gods explain that the molasses chain of sugar is a lot more complex, and it's a little bit harder for microbes to break down than some of the other sugar forms. And so I picked up this honeycomb, and it uses a guave nectar, cane sugar, and one other sugar in there. And I think I found that I got a better response out of it. So I switched from unsulfured molasses to that product for my sugar product. And that's basically the approach I take. I do use silica all the way through. I think silica is very important. For my microbes, I'm using Recharge and Mammoth P. I use both of those. I do Recharge in veg and flower. But I don't do, I only use Mammoth P in flower, or like the week before flower and in through flowering up to week 6, just because it's a little expensive.
Yeah, it is. It is a little expensive. Um, on the As the organic grower, I'm growing. I would try as much as I can to grow organically. For the last couple of years, I just kind of decided to take it on as a challenge. And it's also just a chance to like nerd out about stuff, basically. So, one of the things JR called out, I think you actually both of you guys called out Recharge. So I use Recharge as a microbial inoculant. It also has kelp in there and stuff like that. So I've actually been using that out my backyard, watering. I've got 6 30-gallon pots, 30-gallon pots that are grassroots fabric pots. And so I've noticed a difference when I do just take a 2-gallon watering can, fill it up with some Recharge in the water, and water the plants. It does seem to perk them up a bit when I add in that Recharge. Another microbial inoculant that I really like a lot is EM1. EM1 is great. That's going to help bring out basically the white fuzzy stuff into the soil. You can create your own like bokashi with this as well, which I've done. Like a pro tip, HG and I are always kind of DMing each other throughout the week, and one of the times he hit me up for advanced grow tips, or he was suggesting that we have advanced grow tips. One of my favorite things that I've done with EM1 is added this plus spent like beer grains that you can get from they don't even actually have to be spent. You could just get beer grains from like a brewery store or something, which are like all over the place now because people are brewing their own beer at home. But you can get a grain and just add in EM1 to it, and you basically have your own type of bokashi. And that I've added on top of my soil in the past, and it'll just bring out all kinds of fuzzy stuff and microbial life. So I really like that a lot. And then I was also going to shout out Build a Soil's Build a Bloom. Build a Bloom is their organic bloom supplement, and I really like it a lot. So this is just a powder that you can mix in your water, and it's 210.5 is the MPK on it, and so definitely worth checking that out. All right. Thanks for letting us get nerdy on the nutrient side.
Something I'd like to add about the EM1 too is you can use that if you're trying to do your own KNF fermentations. The microbes in the EM1 work really well in breaking stuff down and getting your fermentations where you want them by adding sugar and whatever kind of organic material.
Yeah, and with EM1 too, you can create your own basically by like you can take like a milk jug and add in some EM1 into it and some water and some like milk, I think, or sugar or something like that. You add in a few things basically, and so you can take that, $30 bottle of EM1 that I just had, and you can basically make it into like a much bigger bottle by
Culturing
doing
it.
that. Yeah, exactly.
And I think, isn't it like a lactobacillus that's what's in there, I believe? And it's the same
Milk,
that they get
yogurt.
from making cheese and stuff, processing cheese. So if you like know a local goat farm or anywhere like that, a dairy, you can get their spent whey and you can use that as an inoculant as well.
Another thing I was going to shout out because I love Build a Soil. I just buy all kinds of stuff from them. They have their Build a Flower top dress. So sorry, it's like obscuring it unless it sees my face. um, but this is their Build a Bloom mixed in with a bunch of other stuff. So this is Ollie Mountain Fish Compost, Build a Soil Worm Castings, gypsum, rock phosphate, Icelandic kelp meal, karanja cake, pre-charged biochar with root-wise microbe complete added to it. So this is a top dress that I can just add on top right when I'm going into flower, basically, and it's gonna just be a nice little boost to it as well. Oh, and then yeah, sorry.
And
Go
while
ahead,
you're on
Johnny.
the build the soil topic, if you are going an organic route, they have a Coots mix that formula that you can get your amendments for and build yourself a good Coots mix. And then a lot of people are really loving the gnarly barley right now. So the combination of those things with compost teas, it's pretty much water only, and you're good to go.
Yeah, I'm doing their I'm using their craft nutrient blend. That's what I'm growing in right now in my backyard. Um, all right, so let's see. Tara just asked, she said, I saw some people use 2% milk watered down. Has anyone ever used that?
Well, that's lactobacillus comes from that. So I'd assume you're going to have some bacteria in there as it ferments a little bit.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't doubt it. I've never done it, but I can see why.
yeah. All right, so we're gonna go back to our original post and get some questions from our posters. So let's see. We had Blazing Phoenix 1111. Blazing Phoenix asked, "What is the best way you can, or sorry, what is the best things you can put in your soil to really help it be more healthy?" What are your top pro tips, guys?
Go ahead, Dan.
Again, I mean, there's entire podcasts that you can watch for hours and hours and hours and hours, and all they talk about is things that you can do to make healthy soil. Um, soil health is something that typically, we talk about microbes and all the action that's going on in there. So I mean, if you want your soil to be healthy, I would say focus on all of on getting all of those microbes in there. You've got bacteria, you've got various funguses, you've got mycorrhizae, you've got all of these things. That's all the stuff that in harmony makes for a really healthy soil. Soil is actually alive itself. It's not a dead part. I mean, the plant is pulling life out of the soil as it's doing its thing.
And if you buy inert mediums that are basically void of that, you need to have products like Recharge or Mammoth P or OG BioWar, whatever, to get that life going back in that medium. Or even like with cocoa, you can use it with cocoa and get life going on in that medium that are going to start delivering nutrients to your root zone.
Yeah, that's what I use. Is I use it exclusively. I'm pretty much 100% cocoa at this point, but we're adding recharge into it, and about once a week, and we're kind of keeping that going in there.
Another thing, if you can get it, worm castings are great to add. You can make your own. You can build a worm bin at home. You can buy worm bins online, but you don't necessarily need to, because they're really basically just like plastic tubs that you put worms and food scraps in, basically. But worm castings is worms after they've worked through whatever you feed them, they're left with their castings, which is basically poop, and it has all the kinds of nutrients and microbiology in it. So worm castings are great to add. You can also buy bags of it, but those bags of compost or bags of worm castings are probably not going to be as microbially active, because a lot of the times those bags are just left out in the sun or like a hot warehouse or whatever. So you might need to like re-inoculate them with those other products that we talked about previously. But worm castings are great. HG asked, build a soil root wise microbes is that good? Yeah, I mean honestly, anything build a soil recommends, I'm like, yes, I'll buy it, whatever. Because like they don't seem to bullshit, and they actually do their homework. They're not trying to like screw people over. They're actually trying to find the best thing that they can possibly find.
I agree with that 100%.
So yeah, root wise microbes, they're a little bit more expensive. I think from what I've seen, root wise is a little bit more expensive than like a recharge and stuff like that. But I don't doubt that it's effective. All right. Oh, and shout out to Crazy Pot Mom who just joined the stream. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to everyone who's been joining us so far. We're about halfway through the hour, so thanks for joining us, everyone. If you've been enjoying this stream so far, you're watching this in the future and you've been enjoying it, please consider becoming a CannaBuzz Premium member. We really do need your support every month. What is it for? Well, it helps us pay the bills, basically. It helps us pay for the streaming bills, the costs of hosting all of our videos and all the posts that we make. Helps us cover those costs, as well as cover some of the other costs that we have from running CannaBuzz as a business. But none of us take any money from it at all. We just put all the money into the community, basically. So your support is definitely appreciated. Use code 420summer at checkout, and that'll give you your first 3 months of CannaBuzz Premium for $4.20 a month. I really appreciate you guys if you could come in and support us there. All right, so let's see. Did you guys have anything else that you wanted to add about making your soil more healthy? Anything else?
No, I think we covered the bases pretty well. I think
All right.
I think we did.
All right, cool. Oh, the other thing I was going to throw out, pro tip, in terms of making your soil more healthy, and kind of on that topic, you guys can reuse your soil. You don't need to throw out your soil every year, especially if you're growing outside. For me, the turning point was I was growing in these 15-gallon pots, And buying 15 gallons of multiple sets of 15 gallons of soil isn't like the cheapest thing in the world, especially nowadays, because bags of soil, it seems like, have become more expensive in the last couple of years. um, but anyways, you can reuse your soil by adding compost to it. And you can buy compost at most bulk soil and like bulk rock places. If you call them up, if you same thing with mulch, you can fill up a whole truck full of mulch for like $50. And so you can do the same thing with compost. And that's what I've been doing, is that every year I go up and pick up like a truck full of compost for about $50 from a bulk like rock and mulch place. And I added that into my pots. And that compost is a really cheap way to add in a lot of organic matter. It's going to be way cheaper than going to your garden store and buying like $15 bags of compost, which is just not sustainable if you're growing in like larger amounts. All right. Let's see. We had next question here. We had a question from Johnny Blaze. Hope their username is Loki Terps. So Johnny Blaze, I hope you're doing well.
Hey.
Loki Terps, hope you're doing well. We were just chatting earlier today on direct message. They
Hey,
asked, what is the best plan of action to find out whether you are in a pH lockout or deficiency?
Go ahead, Dan.
Well, first off, what you pouring in there if you pH'd it? I mean, that's get your water, get all your newts in there, get everything ready to go, and then pH it. I mean, what are you putting in? If it's in soil, you should be like 6.5, 6.7. If you're in hydro cocoa, you should be like 5.8 to 6.2. That's first. Secondly is go test your soil, and probably from that point, I think probably JR can take over there.
Yeah, you can do testing your runoff. So if you're pouring in, you're at the bottom of the meter and you're testing what your runoff is. You can also do a slurry test where you actually take some of the soil in a cup and you mix it, I think, with some water. And then you can do a slurry test and you can get a pH. I believe they do have soil pH meters and stuff like that, which are, I think, very expensive if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, pH lockout's tough. I mean, like Dan said, you really want to be vigilant about what you're pouring in, because most mediums that you're going to have are not going to cause a pH lockout. You know what I mean? So it's mostly what you're feeding or what you're adding to that medium that's going to create that lockout situation. But yeah, it's a good question, and it's something that I'm not super knowledgeable about. But like I said, I pH my mix every time before I water in.
Yeah, and everyone's water is going to be a different pH. A few years ago, my wife and I moved to a different city, and that different city has a different water source than the previous one. And so the water in my new house, or the house that I'm currently living in, is a way different pH than the one that I was growing at previously. So, previously my water wasn't that bad, but at my place now, it's like closer to about 8. So if I'm growing inside in a smaller pot, I definitely needed to pH more, where at my old house, I didn't really need to worry about it as much, I noticed. And so that's just something that you're going to have to you're going to have to test your water, especially if you just moved into a place, definitely test it, but get to know what your pH of your water is just out of the tap. And then yeah, just keep an eye on your plant. There's a lot of guides online that you can look up in terms of what a plant's leaf is going to look like in terms of color and what kind of deficiency that might indicate. So keep an eye on that too, because yes, if your pH is out of whack, that can lead to deficiencies, because your plant's not going to be able to take up all the nutrients that it needs.
I have a couple things to add. The way you'll really identify a pH problem in your plant is the leaves will come up kind of a little bit taco, but they'll start twisting a little bit. There'll be like a turn to them as their new growth is coming out, and that's a good indication that your pH is off. and that you need to do something about it. And I also wanted to say, when it comes to pH meters, there's a lot of really cheap meters you can get that are going to last about a week or two. No, I'm joking, but they won't last very long. I invested in the Blue Lab meter. I've had the same meter for 4 years now, and it's great. It's cost a little extra, but it's definitely worth picking up. Blue Lab.
Yep. Another good brand, a brand that I use is a little pH pen. It's called Apera, Apera. They're like 80, $90 for one. It's just, it may not be in a starter's budget, but over time, there are some various things that you should be investing in as a grower, and a good pH pen is just one of those tools.
And if you're on your shit and not lazy, which I'm calling myself out there on that one. Sometimes I can be a little lazy on this one. You got to make sure that you're recalibrating it. You can get the if you're not familiar with what you're looking at, you'll see like a big jar, or not jar, a big jug of a liquid, and it'll say like -4 or whatever, or it'll say like a pH amount, and you're like, I don't know what that's for. What that's for is so that you can calibrate your pH meter to, you put that solution into a cup, you put your pH meter into it, and you're telling your pH meter like, this is 4 or whatever, the number is supposed to be. And that way you can calibrate it, because it will get out of whack over time, and you're going to need to like keep calibrating it periodically.
Yeah. Yeah. And Crazy Palm
4 and
actually has a really
7.
good Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, JR.
4 and 7. Those are the two ranges of the solution that you buy.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, Crazy Pop Mom actually had a really good comment there saying, hey, keep an eye on it. Your city also can change their pH over time too. So don't always assume that tap's coming out exactly the same every time. Mine goes from 6.7 to 6.9, 7.1 sometimes. So you do want to keep testing it. Don't just assume. Assuming is, in life, just making assumptions is bad. Same thing with growing. If something doesn't feel right to you, you should be testing that along the lines.
Awesome. Great to see all the love in the chat. Shout out to HG, Crazy Pop Mom, Way Neo. Thank you all for participating. Gina was in there earlier. So shout out to you all. We appreciate you all joining us on the live. And I love the emojis, so keep the emojis up. We had the rock sign there for a second there. All right, cool. So next up, we've got, this is a mega question from Mac Buds. So Mac hit us with a 4-parter. Both of you guys were talking about this one before. So should I just start with the first question first, and we'll kind of go through it from there?
Yeah, let's talk about the light.
All right,
Sounds
cool.
good.
So Mac Buds asked, how close should I keep a Mars Hydro 1000 light to my plants? It's a very specific question.
Immediately, JR and I both said almost at the same moment, how big's your canopy? That light is intended for flowering up to a 2x2 foot canopy. It's a small light. It's I would call it the my first light, or a personal grow kind of, you're going to get one good plant out of it, maybe. That said, it's actually pretty hot light at 12 inches. It actually puts out about 1400 ppfd, which is actually pretty hot. You may even want to back it up a little bit to get a better spread. I would say 14 to 16 inches with maybe 2 to 2.5 foot canopy at most. That light is not made for anything bigger than that.
Yeah, and I think something that would be a service to everyone is to, when you're out there buying LED lights, look at the true wattage from the wall, because sometimes marketing can make you think one thing when actually you're getting another. So Mars was clever to call that at 1,000, because people are going to say they're automatically associating it with the 1,000-watt HID, or 1,000-watt HID. And so then they're going to, in their mind, think, wow, I'm getting a 1,000-watt light, when in fact, I think the Mars 1000 is like 300 watt, 400 watts at best.
I think it was maybe. I had my spec sheet. While you keep talking, I'm going to pull up the spec sheet, because I have
But
it.
anyways, you'll find the wattage from the wall is a lot different than the number that they're trying to tell you it is. And with LEDs, you really want to be a little selective in what you get, because it's going to have a high impact on the way your flower develops the resin you develop. You want a full spectrum white LED. Um, I recommend if you're doing a 4x4 tent, you start with at least a 600 watt light, or a fixture, I should say. If you're going bigger, like a 5x5, they've got even bigger ones. A couple really good companies are Horticultural Lighting Group, HLG, and also I like the Growers Choice lights. They're really good. I've got a few friends that are using those, and they're more of a spread out light, where like I'm using the HLG 600R spec, and the R spec is the red, because a lot of white LEDs in the beginning weren't implementing enough red in there to simulate the later seasons of flowering. So you really want to make sure your spectrum, you know what you're getting in there. There's even lights now that are adding far red in there. So there's a lot to learn about a light before you choose a light. But like I said, look at the true wattage that's coming off the wall, and let that be more of your guide to what you're buying.
Yeah, and that light I just did research it. That one is a 150 watt at the wall. So it is kind of like it's a quarter of a quantum board, or actually it's one quantum board. If it was a 1x1, you would have a 2x2 and a 4x4. It's one segment of a quantum board. So that's going to flower pretty nicely, about a 2x2 area at 14 to 16 inches.
All right. Next up, MacBuds asked, and they're talking we're going to be talking about in this question, because one of the things I try to do in our videos and stuff like that is break down terminology. So this next thing that we're going to be talking about is the lighting schedule. So if you're new to growing weed, or you haven't done it before or whatever, the cannabis plant is going to start flowering once it gets a certain amount of light, or really it's kind of the opposite, once it stops
No,
getting a certain amount
darkness.
of light. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So with cannabis plants, most people, what they do is they do what they call flip to flower, and they change the lighting schedule to be something like a 12 by 12, or 12 hours on and 12 hours off. Mac Buds is asking, is 12-12 better than 10-14, so 10 hours on and 14 hours off when in flower, or does it depend on the strain? So is 12-12 better
It
than 10
does.
by 14?
It does depend on the strain lighting timing. Can be different for different strains, but anytime you go into those lower amounts of light, like a 10, 14, you're going to lose a little bit of yield. You're definitely not going to get maybe the solidness that you would want out of it, so it's going to hurt you on your yield. DJ Short, from the guy who created the blueberry strain, um, he said that 11 and 13, he found, produced more genotypic expressions in his flowers. So some people will do like a 12-12 cycle up until about week 4 or 5 of flower, and then they'll switch to an 11 and 13 towards the end of the flower cycle, in order to really bring out some of the genotypic expressions of the flower.
Yeah, and the question I would actually ask, almost as a follow-up for what JR just said, is genotypic expression your goal? Are you doing this to try and hunt down and get plants to become very different from each other, so you can narrow down your focus on something you want to keep going down the road, or is yield your goal? If growing big buds is your goal, to me, photons make buds. So for me, cutting out 10% of your daily light, or 16% of your DLI there, is probably going to produce 10 or 15% smaller buds naturally. But those buds may have better expression to them. So it just depends on what you're going for.
Yeah, and even like Rasta Jeff from Irie Genetics, he
And he goes
recommends
up
the
with it.
last 7 to 10 days of flower
Yep.
that you go back to an 18 and 6 uh, light cycle. I haven't been brave enough to do it yet, but I think I want to try it at some point.
Yeah, I'm right there with him. It's like I know that Rasa Jeff does do that, and everything that photons make colas, and in that last 10 or 12 days, we're not concerned with showering it with so much light that it's going to re-veg. It takes 14 days for a plant to get re-vegging. So as long as you're inside of 8, 10, 12 days from harvest, some people are cranking that light way up now, going to 16.8 with it, because it just puts on a bunch of weight.
All right. These next, they're MacBud's other two questions we've actually kind of talked about previously, so we might be able to kind of move through these quickly. Question 3 was, what's the best way to balance water pH when dealing with city water? Do you get?
pH is not the problem with city water. The city water is the salts that are in it.
Yep.
The EC. If it comes out really high EC, then you really need to use a filtration system to get that water at a more pure state.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I'm watering my plants indoors, I just have a 3x3 tent because I don't have a big space in my house to grow. So I'm usually just watering with like a 2-gallon watering can, basically. So, I basically just fill it up and use a pH meter like we were talking about earlier to test the pH. And then I just pour in a tiny amount. So usually, maybe a little capful of pH down or whatever you need to do to adjust your pH. For me, it's always down because my water is around an 8 or so, or upper 7s when it comes out of the faucet. So I just adjust like that. All right, the next question was, is there a proper way to top autoflowers is what they mean. Is there a proper way to top autos, and is it beneficial or will it hurt the plant?
We did talk about this
Yeah.
already. I pretty much don't recommend topping an autoflower. You can defoliate, you can remove fan leaves in order to focus growth into the flowers, but I don't really recommend topping an autoflower.
There's just no time for that plant to recover and grow to the full size you're going to want it to by the time by the time you cut off 5 days of growth topping it.
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy to f things up with an autoflower. They're great. Don't get me wrong, but they are going to be a little bit more sensitive and can be easily stunted and stuff like that. So that's where with topping, you can, if you kind of mistime it or whatever, you might just end up stunting the plant's growth, and it's just going to be a much smaller plant as a result because they kind of get stuck where they're at, and then they just start flowering, and then it's not going to get any bigger than where it was at. So you can kind of end up with much smaller plants than maybe you wanted to. All right, let's see. That was MacBud's question. So thank you so much, MacBuds, for all those questions. All right, this next one is from Gandalf 420 Gorilla. Let's see. It's a long one.
He basically wants to know if we can grow with using a mercury vapor bulb, if you can negate the heat, would that grow good reefer? And then, what are all the specs that you need to be focused on with all these keywords being thrown around with LEDs?
Yeah.
Probably the second question I'll take first because that one's actually probably easier to answer. Mercury vapor is really lousy for flowers. It's okay for veg. It's a very, very high spikes on the blue and green, and green isn't even used by our plants really, but the blue end of the spectrum is pretty hot on mercury vapor. That's going to be okay in early veg, but mercury vapor has no red in it to speak of at all. There's almost no light, and that is not going to produce really good quality product. If you want to use it to augment blue into something where you're already in a red heavy room, then mercury vapor could be useful for that. But I would think that in the arc lamp technologies, it's probably the worst of the 4 or 5 major kinds you could pick.
And they're not very energy efficient at all.
Yeah, they're made for lighting your driveway at night. They're not made for growing plants.
So he asked, his second question was, what does an individual need to focus on if they decide to grow with LED? So, JR called out some manufacturer names. That, as someone who's like, haven't dove deep into the specs and all the things, getting recommendations from other people that know their shit and have grown a decent amount of weed and had good results is a good place to start. I feel like, hitting up people like Dan or JR or other people and asking what kind of lights do you guys use is a great place to start, rather than just going onto Amazon and trying to find the cheapest one that you can get with the highest number on it. You know what I mean? Which is where probably a lot of beginners start, is they go onto Amazon and try to find like the most wattage for the lowest dollar amount or whatever, and kind of go from there. If you do that, you're gonna end up with like a light like we were talking about earlier that's not really powerful enough for what you need. But
Yeah.
anyways, do you guys have the recommendations?
Well, I think you made a point, Sam, that that's kind of off topic a little bit, but that was the key to my success as a grower, was watching what I started out on the Overgrow forum, and I would watch what other people do, and then I would see the bud that they produced with what they did. If I liked that bud, then I would key into what they were doing and try to pick off that and bring it into my style of growing. Like LED, those things came out probably 4 years before I even jumped on board, because I wasn't seeing the results that I wanted to see. And now that they got the wattage that they do, the spectrum that they do, and they are able to replace 1,000-watt HID bulbs, I went on board. So I think that's a very cool point, that watch what other people are successful with, and then try to emulate that in your style of growing the best that you can.
That's good advice for everything in life. I mean, in any stretch, not just growing cannabis. I mean, if you want to be successful at something, surround yourself with all the people that are doing it and making it, and you'll just learn. That said, I'm kind of a light geek, so I tend to kind of delve into all the spectrums and all the stuff. What's in the picture behind me is actually my current light right now, which is a 6 bar, 48-inch bars, 6 of them, called the Geek Beast Pro 630, which uses the most common and most prevalent LED, the little tiny LED elements are Samsung LM301Bs. And pretty much at that point, the only differences between every brand out there that uses Samsung LM301Bs is what the shape of it is. Are you doing bars or squares? How spread out is the light? An LM301B is an LM301B. If you have 1,000 of them, it's going to produce that amount of light. The rest of it is about efficiency of the driver they're running, maybe the brand or features. Do they have Bluetooth or not? Or, that's all. None of that makes a difference to the plants. It's just those raw LEDs sending out light. That's all they care about. So when you're comparing brands, what came up earlier is when you're looking for LEDs, don't look at the marketing number like 500W or 1000W. There's no 1,000-watt LEDs. Look at, if you want to see how much light it's going to put out with those LM301s and probably some far red that they add in on that on a lot of the newer lamps. Look at the wattage at the outlet. If it says it's 600 watts, like my 630-watt Geek Beast up there, it's putting out, it's drawing 630 watts of light, and that thing produces tremendous amounts all the way to 4x4, all the way out to the edges. You know, other lights like that Mars one, or the Mars 1000 that we talked about earlier, you probably uses very similar or those same Samsung LM301s, just a lot fewer of them. So it's only going to flower that little 2x2. Look at the spectrum. If everybody's putting out Samsungs, then pretty much it's going to be this, a Samsung 4K LED is a Samsung 4K LED. It doesn't matter what brand of light it's in. So there you're going for power draw at the outlet and price, and does it cover your needs and your tent at your height?
And so we'll call out again some brands that we do like. HLG, or Horticultural Lighting Group. JR called out earlier. He also called out Grower's Choice was the name, I think he said, right? Grower's Choice.
Yeah, Grower's Choice. They've got really good fixtures.
I like Spider Farmer. I have an SF. There's a Spider Farmer 1000, 2000, and 4000. I have a 4000. Those are all Samsungs as well. That's what I run in my veg tent. Spider Farmer's a great brand. They're fairly cheap on Amazon as well.
I'd agree for veg. I would agree for that.
Yeah.
What about?
Well, I mean, I got that Geek Beast, and because I need the coverage. When you're moving into flower, you need something bigger than that. But for a veg tent, oh yeah, 4000 is plenty for vegging it.
How's Spectrum King these days? Are they all right?
They actually started doing a lot of commercial lighting, because they have the waterproof rating. So they're doing like stadiums and stuff like that. So I talked to Brendan from Spectrum King at the Cowboy Cup in Oklahoma, and he said they're staying pretty busy. They are staying, but as far as like, I think they do have a new series of lights out. But the last I checked in with them, they were at the 602,
Yeah.
and it wasn't a very spread out light, so you kind of had to have it pretty high. But if you have like a greenhouse situation where you need to augment light and you need something that's going to hold up to the environment that it's in, those lights are really effective.
Yeah, I think they do make lights that are kind of like an array, like Dan has in his picture. I can't remember what that model is, but I think
The
they just started.
Phoenix, they have a Phoenix. Phoenix
Yeah,
680 watt is a bar array, 6 bar array.
yeah. So they started making those. I have the Spectrum King 602 that JR is talking about. I actually won it at the Dudes Grows Cup back in 2019 or whatever that was. That was pretty awesome. That's like a $2,000 light that I won. So pro tip from that one, if you go to a thing and there's a raffle, fill out the raffle ticket. A lot of people aren't filling out the raffle tickets. So anyways, I use that Spectrum King in my backyard, just like JR was talking about, in a kind of greenhouse setup. And that really helped me. And I didn't have to worry about that light because it was waterproof. So, if it was going to rain or my greenhouse leaked or whatever, I wouldn't have to worry about that, like messing up the light. All right, so we're just coming up on an hour on the live stream. So thanks everyone who's been watching so far. If you're watching this in the future, watching the playback, thank you so much for watching. We've got a couple more questions that we're going to crank through on the comments section. Want to thank everyone who's been watching in the live stream: Crazy Pop Mom, Miss Cadabra, Way Neo, HG. Thank you all for watching. Tara. So thank you all for watching. All right, so let's see. And before I move on too quickly, please consider supporting us. Use the code 420summer at checkout with CannaBuzz Premium, and you'll get your CannaBuzz Premium for $4.20 a month for your first 3 months. We'd really appreciate your support. All right, so our second to last question is from Nikki Buck 15. They asked, how do I know if I've burnt the tips of the seedlings and the first set of leaves with so basically, let me rephrase this. How do they know if they've burnt the first set of leaves on a seedling with light or nutrients?
So in other words, I burnt my seedling. Was it the light or the nutrients is the question. Okay.
Probably both.
Yeah, seedlings don't take much nutrients. If you're adding a whole lot in there, that may actually be the problem. They don't take a whole lot of light either. I would ask, like, where is your, it's tough to say because I haven't seen your grow and I don't know what the exact situation is. But generally speaking, seedlings don't need much light, and they really don't need a whole lot of nutrients until you really start getting some good vegetative growth there, and that's when you want to get either some organics in there, get soil amended, or get some salt in there.
So that's probably going
But
to be at least a couple weeks, probably 2-3 weeks, even
yeah,
more.
or I mean, if you're starting it in something like Fox Farm, it might even be too hot a soil, even at the beginning there. You may want to lighten it up with like 50% cocoa just in that first little cup where you're starting that seedling, because there's a lot of really, really good soils out there for cannabis that you do not want to start a seed in.
Yeah, Fox Farm makes a product called Light Warrior. It's kind of a seedling peat blend that's not charged at all like the Ocean Forest is. But yeah, seedlings can be finicky. It's tough. Getting them to crack, that's one thing. And then once you get them in the ground, and some people plant right into the ground now. I see guys now that don't even use the old paper towel method, but that first 6 inches of growth is really volatile, and it's you got to be really careful about how you water them as well. They can get really upset.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way this year. I started my seeds outdoors in a cup, and they got kind of hurt by the too much heat and maybe a little bit too much light. So I moved them back inside, and then the problem I was running into with growing them in a solo cup was the solo cup was drying out towards the top, but not drying out towards the bottom. And so you had this like really wet bottom of the solo cup, and the roots were kind of getting stunted there, or whatever it was. It ended up having like a deficiency in the plant, basically. And so it really stunted those seedlings accidentally, where my plants would be probably a lot further along today if I would have up potted sooner, or maybe I fixed my watering situation. So the moral of the story there on the seedling front is don't get too down on yourself if you F things up or make mistakes. It's very easy to make mistakes with seedlings, and I feel like you're always kind of learning and figuring out what you can do to improve it. And I'm sure there's people that have been doing it for a long time and they've got it down to a science, but at least for me personally, I feel like I'm always kind of dialing in how I do it and what works best. Next question from Nikki was, how often should I be giving nutrients versus just water? There's a lot of info on this, like in week 1 and week 2 and week 3, and when I add nutrients, but should I be feeding nutrients every day during the weeks or just once during each week? And then yeah.
It's going to depend on what if you're an organic grower. I mean, a lot of these guys are like, all I do is pour water in it and that's it. So feeding in general, it's going to be down to how you intend to grow these plants specifically. There's no one right answer to your question. If I'm answering it my way, I'm doing my grows in 3-gallon cocoa pots, and I'm basically adding nutrients every single time because cocoa doesn't hold much. And so it really, like, you need to just keep amending it like every single time you're feeding it, or there's just not going to be anything for the plants to eat. If you're in a good quality soil, man, sometimes people don't even add nutrients at all.
Sorry, go ahead, JR.
I'm in I use Royal Gold's King's Mix, and it's a cocoa blend with some organic goodness in it. And for me, when I I come right out of the cloner, right into the 2-gallon of King's Mix. I give it water only for the first 2 waterings. Actually, I take that back. I give it water and microbes for the first 2 waterings. And then after that, give it the full nutrient line and just start running with it. And then when I'm going from veg to flower and I'm transplanting from the 2-gallon pot into the 10-gallon pot, and I put them into flower, I give them water only for another 2 waterings, and then I give them a half strength feeding of flower, and then I just hit them with what my regimen is and take off running. And like Q said, you don't want to hang out in a solo cup for very long. It's kind of wasteful, but a trick that people do is they take a clear solo cup and they put it inside a red solo cup, and then they have their start so they can pull it out and see where the roots are. You want to make sure you cut holes in the bottom of your solo cup so that you've got good drainage, and you can see you really don't want to get that thing pissed off, because like Q says, once it starts getting root bound in there, it'll start developing deficiencies because it's not getting the nutrition and the stuff that it needs to be a healthy plant. So you really want to be mindful of your timing in getting from your solo cup into your 2, 3, whatever gallon pot you're going to do. But like I said, I go straight from the arrow cloner right into 2 gallons, because that allows those young plants, those young clones, to really have the root space and all the nutrition that they need to really take off. And once the plant takes off, if you don't impede its growth, you're going to get the maximum potential out of that plant. I do like maybe a month and a half, a month veg, and then I'm going into flower, and I'm getting 9-ounce plants. So I mean, if you're really mindful about how you stage your growth and don't let them get pissed off, then you can really push your plants to really produce well for you.
When I was growing synthetically, or even when I'm growing organically and I'm adding in nutrients, what I'm typically doing my very first grow, I grew an ocean forest. That's the soil that a lot of people are going to be using. It's the soil that you find at a lot of hydroponic stores. You're probably not going to find it at like hardware stores or Home Depot or whatever. Anyways, with Ocean Forest, you could take a clone or a seedling and put that into a 3 gallon or 5 gallon pot of Ocean Forest and probably not add any nutrients to it for at least 3 weeks or so, maybe even 4 weeks. After that, what I typically like to do is water in nutrients at least once a week, if not twice a week. And what I liked to do is I liked to alternate. So let's say I added nutrients on Monday. By Wednesday, it's probably going to be dry and I need to water again, or maybe another day later, maybe Thursday. So maybe 2 or 3 days later. That time, I'm maybe just going to use water, just water only. Or maybe what I'll do is I'll add in recharge, some sort of microbes, and then the next time I water, I'll add in nutrients again. So I like to kind of alternate like that instead of adding in nutrients every single time. When I was growing in soil like that, a soil that already has like a little bit of nutrients and stuff in there.
That's pretty common. A lot of guys do a feed flush is what it's called. It's like a feed, then water only, feed, water only.
Yeah, definitely worth trying. Let's see. Crazy Pot Mom says, I always start with less nutrition than they recommend because a lot of my plants don't seem to want that much food.
True. Especially if you have a really good microbe colony population going in your root zone, you can dial your nutrients back quite a bit, really.
Mhm. But also remember that a lot of the ways people push their grows to try and optimize things more when they start doing things like adding carbon dioxide or they get a bigger, better light. Anytime you increase any of those inputs, it's going to also increase the others around it. So you may find getting a light that's twice as bright, you're going to have to give more newts now, because those plants are, more photons equals more photosynthesis equals more inputs needed. So there's this kind of harmony and balance between all the lights, the newts, the water, the environment. Messing at carbon dioxide, adding up a bunch on one of them is going to probably drag the others up with it.
And then before we move on to the last question from Tasman, I was gonna, and also shout out to the emojis in the chat. I just saw some hearts, so thanks for the hearts, the green hearts. The tip I was gonna throw out there, because I'm on other cannabis forums and Reddits and all this kind of stuff. A lot of people, the problem that the mistake that they make is by overwatering. And so the big pro tip with watering, if you're watering your plants, especially if you're growing in soil, let's say again you're growing in maybe a 3 gallon or a 5 gallon pot or even bigger pots, the best pro tip is to water that plant, water it, and then feel how heavy the pot feels. And also feel what it feels like when you just put the soil in there and it's not damp soil. It's just you just put soil in that 3 gallon pot for the first time. Feel how heavy it is, and then feel how heavy it is after you've added water to it, and use that as a way to kind of judge if it's time to water again, because you will be able to tell. This feels about half as heavy as it does when it was full of water, or this feels like it felt when I just added soil into it, because you'll just feel, oh wow, this is way lighter. If it's super light like that, it's time to water. And you can tell, like, your plants aren't necessarily going to be starting to droop again when you get down to that lighter pot weight. It's really crucial to get in and water before you let it get too light, because you're going to see your plants droop and you're going to stunt your growth. And it's just highly recommend it, because when you let your plants, especially when you're in flower, and you let them get too dry, and you'll see photos from people, or even a friend of mine, or Jay, actually, RQ's dad, on CannaBuzz. One time I came over and I was like, hey man, you need to water that plant. And he didn't. And then the next day it was all the leaves are down. And that's not something that you want to see when you're in flower, because you just lost some time there, and your flowers are not going to be as great as you wanted, as they could be, I guess.
Yeah, the other thing is it gets. Go ahead.
Go ahead. That process is a dry back, is what they call that.
Yeah.
So you really want to gauge that dry back to maximize the potential of your microbes as well. If you let that pot get totally dried out, the microbes they're going to die. They're not going to be there in population. So you really want to follow your dry back. Like Q says, you can read your plants. I like to read my plants about 4 to 5 hours after the lights have come on. That's going to tell you the posture, the true posture of the plant, because as the light cycle goes on, it may get its full DLI and start to droop down like it's going to sleep. So that's not a good indication. You may think, oh my God, I need to water this plant. It's drooping. So you got to really be careful when you read your plant. But like, you look at the posture of your plant and your leaves, and that will give you a good indication of how your dry back is going and when you need to water in again.
Yeah, and I would also I'd add a final note that if you let your soil, especially soil, things that are peat based, if you let them get too dry, they become what's called hydrophobic, and you pour water and it just goes straight around, straight off the surface and right down the sides of the pot and straight out the bottom of the pot, and your inside isn't really going to absorb anything, and so you have to almost kind of pre-wet. To try and get it to soak back in. Some people put a drop or two of like Dawn dish soap in the water, which has a wetting agent in it, and that can break down a lot of that hydrophilia. I don't think it seems to hurt the plants at all, from what I've heard. I haven't done it, but a lot of people solve the problem like that. So just watch out. If you let it get too dry, it can make it take a lot longer for you to water it now.
And watering in a surfactant, like Dan just said, Jay the Plant Speaker has a product with Build the Soil that you can use as a surfactant to kind of help distribute the water and everything inside your soil.
I think some Build a Soil uses aloe. I think is it aloe or is it coconut? I can't remember if it's coconut.
They have a new one, a new product that they're using through Jay the Plant Speaker, and I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's a surfactant. It's a soapy type material, organic material.
Yeah, there's definitely stuff like that you can use that are helpful. Let's see. Way Neo asked, might be a silly question, but can I overwater in deep water culture? Would that be the air gap area? Can you overwater in deep water culture? DWC.
I don't know anything about DWC. I mean, I know a little, but not enough, you know.
I can't speak on the topic. I imagine as long as you've got really, really good circulation in there and you've always and those roots aren't like in standing water, I would think it probably isn't going to hurt things too much. I think letting roots get dry is where the problem is.
Right.
Yeah, and in DWC, you want to have really a good grasp on your water temperature and the oxygenation of that water.
All right. Let's see. We're going to go to our last question from Tasman, but before we do, shout out to everyone in the chat. Oddflower88 just joined. Way Neo, Crazy Pop Mom still hanging out with us. Keeper of the Strains joined a little bit ago. Welcome, welcome. Tara, Miss Cadabra, thank you, HG. Thank you all for hanging out with us today. We really appreciate it. We had a blast. We'll be doing more of these sorts of things in the future, so stay tuned. We'll do other grow versions, but we'll also do other things too. We got other topics that people want to learn about, from edibles to making cooking, not just cooking, but making your own supplements and all kinds of different things. So stay tuned. We'll be doing more of these. This is a great test for us. That was kind of why I wanted to do this, test this out and see how it worked. So thank you all for being a part of that test, and let us know in the comments on the video after the video post. Let us know what you thought. If you enjoyed it, give us some positive feedback. It's always appreciated. Keep the spirit high. So we'd love to see that. But all right, last question is from our man, Robert Nelson. Tasman, hope you're doing well, Robert, today. He asked, so basically, Robert had 10 autoflowers that he was running, and 2 of which popped out male parts. The only difference was that he let those plants go a month longer than the others. And so he was wondering, if you just let it go for a while, does it, like, out of desperation, just like sprout male
Yes.
parts, basically.
I don't. His question seemed to blame the ruderalis component of it. I'm like, I don't think that's ruderalis. I think if you let anything go too long, if you let cannabis go 3, 4, 5 weeks beyond its normal harvest date, that plant is trying to create seeds. Cannabis's goal is make more cannabis to reproduce. So everything in this plant, everything that this plant wants to do is make seeds and die. And it's going to do, if you let it go way too long, that's obviously overstressing it. It's creating a situation where it's going to harm on you. And that's what you're seeing. I don't know that that makes it bad genetics if it's happening that far past, its prime. I think, it's just like, well, this one does that. Others do too. Some don't.
Yeah, I'm suspicious of the genetics itself. And my other question would be, what kind of male parts? Were they balls or were they bananas? Because if it's an unstable herm that shows balls early, then that's one thing. If it's a late flowering banana that's trying to, like Dan said, push out some pollen at the last minute, that's another. But with genetics, I mean, instability is bred in a lot of genetics these days. So you really got to be mindful of those initial first weeks of flower that you're really looking for male parts. If you see those male parts, kill the plant. It's going to seed out your run. It's going to seed out anything around it. So you definitely want to get that out of there immediately. But yeah, I've seen situations where you throw out a pack of seeds. One pheno is completely fine. The next pheno is throwing out 1,000 bananas and it's trying to pollinate your room. So you really got to be watchful. Most genetics have herm potentials in them, especially nowadays. A lot of guys don't do the long-term line breeding that it takes to weed that stuff kind of out to make it not as common. But like Dan said, it's natural life cycle of the plant, especially of a female flower, is to be seeded out so that she has done her job and the next generation lives. So she doesn't have to have a male pollen part to do that. She can do that herself or from one of her sisters, and she can pollinate herself, create enough seeds to then keep the population of that plant going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider it to be plant stress if you've pushed it to 4 weeks past when it's kind of expected to be flowering. I mean, that's like probably anything that close to death is going to do weird things. But that said, yeah, you start with like what JR said, start with good genetics. I mean, there's a lot of good companies out there producing really fire genetics right now. Mephisto is one that I've heard of that seems to be producing really good stuff. But remember what an autoflower is. It's cannabis sativa that has cannabis ruderalis bred into it. So you've got crossbreeding. Just calling it being an autoflower in itself means now we've got this crossbreeding in there because that's what makes it an autoflower. So you have to be cautious on where those autoflowering genetics came from. Whose ruderalis went into your blue dream?
All right. Well, I just got the text that my wife she's heading out, and so I got to deal with the dogs. And, it came at the perfect time because we're just wrapped up our last question. So thanks to everyone who submitted questions on our post earlier in the week. We really appreciate it. Thanks everyone who joined us on the live stream. We've got Crazy Pot Mom, 4Dub V, Way Neo, Oddflower 88. Who else did we have? We had Tara, Miss Cadabra, HG. Thank you all for watching. If I missed you, I'm sorry. But thanks everyone who watched us live. If you're watching this in the future, please leave a comment below. Let us know what you thought of this video. If you'd like to see more, if you have other topics that you want us to do live streams or videos about, let us know as well. We'll keep that in mind, and we'll be bringing on other members of the community. So it won't just be Dan, but I'm sure we'll bring Dan back again. But we'll have other members of the community as well that we'll bring in. And we're also going to be doing interviews with community members. So stay tuned for more lives. We really do appreciate your time. And then Second to last thing, again, remember we need your support. Please consider becoming a CannaBuzz Premium member. You can upgrade by opening the slide out menu on the app. There's a subscription options link there. Tap that link and you'll be able to check out our subscription options. Check out CannaBuzz Premium and use code 420summer at checkout, and that will give you your first 3 months for $4.20 each. We'd really appreciate your support. We need it to help keep the lights on, pay for streaming bandwidth, and pay for app development. We've been putting out some features recently, and we got a big events feature coming out later this summer. So your support is really appreciated. And lastly, I need to thank my co-hosts here. I'm joined by JR Token. JR Token, thank you so much, JR, for being a part of this. Always cranking out great weed videos and pictures. So if you love great weed, make sure to follow JR and learn from his expertise.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate it. I really do.
Thanks, guys.
And then, of course, we need to thank Pack NW Dan. Dan, thank you so much, Dan.
It's fabulous to be here. Had a blast.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much. Make sure that you have a great weekend. It's Sunday right now, but tomorrow is the 4th of July. So if you're watching this live or watching this, make sure to have a safe 4th of July. Toke some of your favorite weed and have a great day. And then have a great rest of your summer. I know a lot of us has been going through some stuff. So make sure to kick back, enjoy some of your favorite weed, light up a J, and just relax a little bit. And remember that the CannaBuzz community is here. So join us, hang out, and have fun. And we'll see you on the next stream. And in the meanwhile, we'll see you on CannaBuzz. So thanks, guys, for joining us.
Peace.
Growers love.
All right. Thanks, guys.